He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Posted by Angel Guide Indy. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's. Both of us really proud. This is going to be long, so TLDR at the bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Paul. Ex-boyfriend's new wife, Jane. Ex-boyfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe. And oldest brother, Zeke, our parents and me. When I was 14, my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiance, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe his argument was, "Your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad." Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. See, her birthday falls sometimes on Easter, and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, "Well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him." Again, my sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest 2 brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing the spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she should have been put out of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know you're probably thinking, no he wouldn't, he knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew that was born on Valentine's Day was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So, Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding picture 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So, Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been, infrequently, paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be a butt and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now, at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brant Lely. You know the ones I'm talking about. And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, the conniving little weasel I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born. But there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents just created one. It's a beautiful name, and it's just what Jane was looking for. She loved it. She stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and also to remind him to pay his freaking child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do sometimes still call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. Oh my goodness, as a father myself, everything about Paul is wrong. The deception, trickery, just everything. I can't even put in. I would be here a long time if we really wanted to break this thing down. So, very funny revenge for the name of Sarah to the other baby. What do you think about that? Comment below and let me know. Though I have to say, I wonder what Jane and the little girl would think if they knew all this. Threaten my pregnant wife over parking? Enjoy your misdemeanor, HOA Bully. Posted by PR Throwaway 83094. This was last year. I just sold my home in the HOA. About 5 years ago, I bought a 1,500 square foot townhome condo in an up-and-coming town, right in the downtown area. This is a valuable property with home prices having increased 35% since I purchased. This was a wonderful area in walking distance of everything I loved as a single bachelor. When I moved in, all my neighbors were wonderful. We all got along great, except for one person. She belonged to the HOA board, but was moving on because you can only serve 8 years. We'll call her Gimpy J. Gimpy J is a 65-plus-year-old widow whose husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack. She doesn't have much to do. She met a man online and moved on, and I was happy for her. Talking to my passive neighbors, I hear bits and pieces of why things are at the HOA because of Gimpy J and another woman who had to move because of age. On the board, the two of them bully residents. They change the landscaping from mulch to pine needles. They stop upkeep on the pool deck because they hate kids. They reported one house for anything and everything because their kids were too loud. She bullied a woman with MS because Gimpy J was feeding feral cats and attracting raccoons and possums near our homes, and animal control was called. Residents did not like her. I got married and my wife has been living with me for about 2 years now at this point. We are very happy. During this time, Gimpy J began spending more and more time with her new boyfriend. He lives about an hour away from our house in the country. She would initially spend the weekend and then a week there until she began living there all the time with very little time spent here. Maybe 15 minutes to 2 hours a month would be at our complex. Now at our complex, there is only one rule on parking. Each resident is entitled to 2 spots close to their building, but not necessarily in front of your unit, and there is no limit to parking spots you may occupy. Close to it is the key word. We have new folks on the board who are all under 40 years of age, and the place is starting to get spruced up. We have some friends over regularly, and they park in front of our unit. Gimpy J had 2 hip replacements done, and we had not seen her in about 7 months. And our little area of the complex consists of 8 townhomes that face each other, 4 on one side and 4 on the other. There are 8 spots for 3 homes and a handicap spot for one of the neighbors. Gimpy J started coming back around in January for longer periods, a day on the weekend to go out downtown or to visit some friends. She started complaining that we were in her spots. Again, there are no assigned spots. We were willing to move our friends' vehicles for her to another empty spot. That is, until she started occupying 2 spots at a time with her vehicle. This behavior continued as she would come in taking 2 spots anytime she was here. The rules in the master deed say that no vehicle can take more than 1 spot without written permission from the board of directors or property managed group and cannot continue for more than 2 days with permission. This was to account for residents moving in and out. Suddenly that spring, my wife had a medical issue and was hospitalized for 4 days and on disability for 8 weeks. My mom was the only family member on both sides that had the capability of coming down to where we lived to help us out. She drove down and we needed to occupy 3 spots. I promptly let our property management company know and the board of directors know what was happening, providing them with my mom's make, model, and plate number, and that she would be here for 6 to 8 weeks, just in case anyone had an issue. Gimpy J's first time home in 6 weeks. We had a car in front of her house, but she had room for her vehicle. She marched over and banged, and I mean it was loud, on the door, demanding we move the car, and tried to open my front door and walk in my home. Yes, she tried to enter my home. It shook my dog, who peed herself. It was that loud, and who in turn growled and chased her out. I promptly told her there was no assigned parking, and the rule is 1 car, 1 spot. We would have moved a car out of respect one last time and saw she occupied 2 spots with it, per usual. The next time it happened, 2 weeks later, we refused to move our vehicle. We also began taking pictures for our records and communicating with our HOA of Gimpy J's erratic behavior. She continued to arrive, bang on our door, scream at us for having a car parked in her spot. One time, banging on the door, she dented the frame with her keys. A few additional times when we were not home, she would come in and park occupying 2 spots. I would take more pictures for my records in case something happened because of her erratic behavior. Finally, it happened. About this time last year, I was at the gym and I get a call from my mom and my wife, frantic that someone is going to tow my wife's car. I drive home as fast as I can, and it's Gimpy J's boyfriend's son and his girlfriend, whom we've never met. This jerk, who doesn't live here and has no business here, is screaming at us and insulting my pregnant wife and mother. My mother-in-law pays X dollars a month for these spots. You effers are breaking the rules. I'ma tow that there SUV. All while drinking beer. Now we know he can't do anything except scream and try to intimidate us outside. He calls his mother-in-law, who is not married to his father, about the situation. Gimpy J drives an hour to our complex. When she gets here, she parks her car behind all 3 of ours and gets out, blocking us in, and I had enough. I quickly snapped some pictures. I called the police. I will not feel unsafe or be harassed in my neighborhood by people who do not live there or are barely there. Gimpy J realizes that I called the police and moves her car. I print out all my documentation, pictures, and communication from the HOA. I shower quickly because I'm disgusting from the gym, and I throw on a nice polo shirt and shorts. Pregnant wife sits in her rocking chair, and my mother sits calmly at the kitchen table. The police arrive, and we can see them hollering, waving arms wildly, and screaming. The police come to the door, and we kindly open up. Gimpy J tries to walk in before I block her and ask her to leave my property and invite the police officers inside. We apologize that we even have to call them over something so petty, but our neighbor is acting crazy and her behavior has been escalating. We explain what is happening, show them communication from the HOA, and show them pictures. The officer quickly had enough of these white trash pieces of crap. He imposes a no trespass order on my porch and will not let her near my property. If she steps foot on our walkway, she is in violation of the order and she will be arrested. We watch him go back out and explain calmly to her, and she starts screaming along with her boyfriend's kid and his girlfriend. This goes on for a while, and the officer calls for backup and a second car arrives promptly. Gimpy J promptly declares it's her property too. She pays her fees and that he can't do that because everything is community property outside of a home. She goes and marches up to my stoop and he arrests her, charges her with disorderly conduct and harassment. The police then tell Gimpy J's boyfriend's son to go home. He gets in his truck with his white trash girlfriend and they drive off. As soon as he hits the road outside of our complex, the second police officer pulls him over for DUI. That's right, the drunk guy screaming at my wife and mother had been drinking the entire time and was loaded. Police couldn't do anything in the complex, but could when he hit the main road. Both of them were hauled off to jail, and we stopped hearing from them about parking. 2 days later, Gimpy J and her boyfriend show up to the complex, and they park her boyfriend's car in our lot and leave it, parked in one spot to ensure it's hers. Well, they drive off and we don't hear from them in a week, and no one is home. Since Gimpy J's boyfriend does not live here and his car is abandoned, I called the HOA to report it. They came and towed his SUV. Gimpy J put her house on the market 8 weeks later. Screw HOAs. Oh man, for the life of me, I cannot understand how they thought these actions were okay. I'd like to know what was going on in their head. Well, honestly, nothing was going on in their head. That's why this happened. Way to go, OP, for standing up for your family. Be sure to comment the secret phrase below, brains, because these people don't have any. My name's Austin, check out another video here, and I'll see you there.